Hi, welcome to Relish Books. Today is Friday, March the 1st, so happy March. And so it is Jane Austen review day. Today I'm doing Mansfield Park. This is the third published book of Jane Austen, but it is interesting because she was actually writing this one after Sense and Sensibility, and then she was still working on it at the time that she published Pride and Prejudice, and then this ended up coming out third. And even though it didn't get the critical acclaim that the first two did, it was by far her biggest commercial success. She made more money off Mansfield Park than any other book that was published in her lifetime, which is interesting because my memory seems to have been correct. And I really feel like, with the possible exception of Northanger Abbey, I'm going to be interested to compare it to that one. With the possible exception of that one, I really feel like Mansfield Park is Jane Austen's weakest book by a lot. I have a lot of problems with it, and so I'm going to go through some of those. I'll mention some good things about it, but mostly, especially you read Sense and Sensibility, you read Pride and Prejudice, you come to Mansfield Park, and it is a huge letdown. Maybe it's that she stopped doing the alliteration. I don't know. But anyway, so it follows the story of Fanny Price, and she is taken into her uncle's home. Her mother made a very poor marriage. And the family is very poor. There's 10 children. The father does not take care of them. And her family is just a mess. Her uncle, who is married to Fanny's mother's sister, takes her in, and then there's a third sister, this other aunt, who's super mean all the time, and she's kind of like the antagonist of the story, but she's not super, super important. Anyway, so Fanny goes to live with her uncle's family, and all her life she is treated with, she's allowed to live in this much nicer, higher society than she would have if she'd grown up with her family, but she is made to feel that all the time. She is not treated as equal to the children in the family. She's put down as inferior. She's basically, people just make her do their errands all the time. She's kind of oppressed, I guess. Her uncle means to be kind, but he doesn't know how to raise his own children, let alone this girl. Sir Thomas's character is one that I do think, out of everybody, is one of the better done in the book as far as it being kind of unique. I feel like the way that his character is approached is something that would not be done in a modern book. The idea of this very stern, strict guy who is still really held up as a good man and progresses and becomes a better man throughout the book. I think his character development is good. But most of the characters in the book are not, it's not that they aren't well done, they just aren't likable. So Fanny is very gentle, she's very meek, she's very frail, I guess. She has a very, back then I guess they would say a weak constitution. I feel like Jane Austen was really trying to do a very different character and to really contrast her. If you look at Elizabeth Bennet and Eleanor and Marianne Dashwood, then you have this very soft, gentle woman, very physically weak. She does have has strong morals, strong principles. She can make strong resolutions when she needs to. She's not a weak person. She's just very, very quiet and shy and meek, which is very different from most Jane Austen heroines. So I appreciate that she was trying to do something different, that she was trying to mix it up, not always have her female leads be these strong, independent thinkers. I get that, and I appreciate it, but Fanny is just not likable. She's always serious. She's always agitated and worried about things and always going through some great emotional strain. And that's part of the story. You know, she does have these things that are very emotionally draining, like all the time. But she's not likable. She's not lovable. You feel for her. You feel the injustice of how she's treated. Um, so you're kind of on her side, but at the same time, you don't really care about her. I mean, you don't really care about the main character and all the troubles that they're going through. It's not going to be a great book for you. So my biggest problem, I guess, is just with her character. And then my second biggest problem is with the romance. Because, again, like, if you don't like the main character and you don't like the romance, and that's what the book is about, it's going to be really rough. So Edmund, Fanny's in love with her cousin Edmund, which, again, remember that it's a different time. That feels really weird to us now. At the time, cousins marrying cousins was very acceptable and very normal. It feels weird. It especially feels weird when they're kind of raised more as brother and sister even, and he thinks of her as a sister, refers to her as a sister multiple times. She never thinks of him in that way. You know, she's in love with him. He doesn't know it. It's like this secret love. And you have to remember, too, that she came there when she was 10 and he was 16. So he was like a man to her already. And out of all the family, where she's neglected and forgotten and put down, he is the one who's basically her champion. You know, he's always kind to her. If anything good happens to her, it's because of him. He, like, brings her forward. He makes sure, he tries to help. He tries to prevent people from just trotting her down all the time. He basically educates her. He shapes her mind. He shapes her principles with his example. So she has this adoration and this gratitude that make it, you know, pretty believable that she would be in love with him, I guess. And so you have to, like, remember that later on in the book, because it's like, after a while, it's like, how can she keep loving this guy? Maybe there's partly, too, a bit of, like, the girl loving the man that she can't have, like, more and more. I don't know, but Edmund pretty quickly falls in love with this other woman who is very flawed. He tries not to see that. He's very blinded by love, but Fanny sees it clearly, and this adds to her misery of him. Not only is he in love with another woman, but he's in love with a woman that she knows doesn't deserve him. And yes, she's biased, but the woman truly does have, like, some very serious judgment and moral issues, and is the very not well suited to Edmund. You know, Edmund is going to be a clergyman, and this woman just despises that. But she tries to, but she genuinely does like Edmund, and she tries to reconcile herself to maybe being with the clergyman if he could be rich enough. So she's a very flawed person. Edmund refuses to see it, but, you know, Fanny sees it, and it really bothers her. And then this woman has a brother who flirts a lot with a couple of Edmund's sisters, and eventually tries to marry Fanny. And this is really where the worst part of Edmund's character for me comes out. Again, you have to remember the time period. You have to remember Fanny's circumstances. But this guy proposes to her. She not only is not in love with him, she's in love with someone else. Of course, nobody knows that part of it, but she doesn't love him. She doesn't like him. And not only does she not love him, but she really doesn't, of course, she wouldn't say it. You know, she's so gentle and grateful and all that. But she really doesn't think well of him as far as his character because of his treatment of her other cousins, particularly her older girl cousin who was engaged. This guy, like, flirted with her a ton and did things that were very indecorous, you know, with a woman who was engaged. So Fanny really doesn't approve of him. And she doesn't love him. She doesn't even like him. So, of course, she refuses, and the way the family reacts to that, everybody else's reactions are expected. Her uncle's very disappointed. He's like, how could you do this? This guy's a guy of fortune. It's this massive honor for him to have, considered you because, you're poor and, you should have thought of your family. You should have thought of your duty. You should have thought of all these things. How could you refuse this man? And he's like, well, yeah, you should love the person that you get with, but they're basically just like, oh, you don't love him? Well, learn to love him. That's kind of everybody's reaction. Everybody's just like, oh yeah, it's your duty to marry this guy because he is higher ranked. He's so charming, and he is deigning to lower himself to marry you. Basically, is kind of what they're saying. Edmund doesn't feel that way, but yeah, one of the most disappointing things about his character is that he sides with everybody else. Fanny is miserable because she feels really guilty that she turned down this guy, that everybody is now telling her that she was so selfish and ungrateful to turn down this man. And one of the things that the guy did, Fanny has this very much loved older brother, and the guy really used that relationship. He got him a promotion that he'd been really needing, and so he tried to play that up, really build up Fanny's gratitude to him. So then everybody uses that too. They're like, how could you turn him down? Look what he did for your brother. Look at all these things, out of all the women, he could have any woman he wants, thousands of women, and he wants you, and you turn him down. So there's all this, and that's all expected. But then Edmund, who knows Fanny better than anybody, who's supposed to know who she really is, and he kind of does the same thing. It's not in the same way. He's like, yeah, I understand that basically he moved too fast, but I'm sure that in time you will come to love him and you guys will be married and it'll be great. And it was really from a very selfish point of view. He did want Fanny to be happy, and this marriage obviously was much better than she probably could have hoped for in a lot of ways, from a money point of view. But he especially wanted it because he wants the families to be as close as possible. He wants these multiple family alliances because he's hoping to marry the sister. So it's really a lack of consideration of Fanny's feelings, of Fanny's mind and heart. Everybody just writes her off. She's like, I don't love him, I don't like him, I never will. And everybody's always just like, oh, well, you don't have experience in romance. You don't know how it'll be. You'll just learn to love him. Nobody takes her knowing her own mind seriously. And Edmund, who has always been there for her, who does know her mind better than anyone, does the same thing. He's like, oh, I'm sure he can win you. It just needs to be in time. And so that's very disappointing. And it actually makes Fanny frustrated to the point that she actually responds more like one of Jane Austen's other characters would have. She kind of has this little, she kind of talks back to him a little bit. And so I really like that part of it. But yeah, that's a really, really disappointing scene with Edmund because he also just writes off her feelings. He writes off her knowing her own mind. He does say that she was right to refuse if she doesn't love him, but he's just convinced that she will love him in time. So that's really disappointing from him. And Fanny's really disappointed in him too at that point. But after that, and after the way that people just keep assuming that she'll marry him. They'll talk about it when you're married and when you're at his house and so and such a place. Everybody just assumes that nobody takes her seriously, and it's super frustrating. I do think it is interesting to note Jane Austen is she doesn't do this thing that modern authors do where they hold up their main character, particularly if it's a female character, to be always right and always particularly like in matters of romance, that their opinions and how they think and feel are just right automatically because they're the main character and they're a woman or whatever. Because I like how she points out, like, this guy is not a good guy. He doesn't have a sound morals or whatever. I like how she points out, though, that despite what Fanny believes, she believes that even if she weren't in love with Edmund, she would never like this man because of the principles that she's seen in him. But he sets out to be so kind and so charming and so nice to her when she's so unused to people being nice to her that the book kind of hints that if she hadn't loved Edmund, it's very likely that this guy could have made her have some feelings for him. Because, yeah, she's not used to people being kind to her, considerate of her. He really did do a lot of things for her, and it is kind of in that time, in some ways, it was an honor that he was paying attention to her, and, people didn't do her many honors. So it does kind of give this idea that even though she persuades herself that she would never have felt anything, that she probably would have, just being realistic. But, so I like that. I like that the characters aren't perfect. I like that you see their complexities and their depth and their flaws, even when they are held up as being really great characters, which is something that is annoying about Fanny. I feel like she is held up as this pillar of righteousness in a lot of ways, with very strong moral fibers, but she doesn't, I don't know, like I said before, she just isn't likable. She, again, she's just constantly so emotional. She's just weeping all the time. It's like, yes, I get it, there's hard things going on, but again, we don't see any humor from her or vitality or, I don't know, any fun. And again, that's not the way she was raised, but I don't know, in a character, it's just hard when you only have a very emotional, serious side, full of gentleness and patience and sound judgment. It's all very good, but it's hard for them to be really likable. She's just missing that spark of character that the other Jane Austen characters have, and the rest of the cast doesn't make up for it. Edmund's a very annoying hero, one of the most annoying heroes of all time, because he's supposed to be such a wonderful guy, but he's just totally blinded by love, and it just makes him look really stupid. And then the way that he treats Fanny just makes him seem really unfeeling, and so yeah, it's just unsatisfying all around. And then again, at the end of the book, one of the biggest problems is that you have this entire book, and it's longer than the first two. It's 400? This book has really small print. It's kind of a small book, but it has really small print. 400 pages. It's longer than Sense and Sensibility and Pride and Prejudice. It's constant turmoil, constant emotionally draining. And then in the last couple pages, you have this very quick, very vague wrap-up. And I'm going to go ahead and talk about what happens at the end. So if you haven't read it, just go ahead and turn off the video at this point. So, yeah. I'm going to spoil what happens. So eventually, the guy who was trying to get with Fanny ends up running off with Fanny's married cousin. And so that destroys his character and opens up a lot of people's eyes. And the way that his sister reacted to it opened Edmund's eyes as to her character. Not fully, but enough to where he was like, okay, we can never be together. He's very sad about it. He comes home and he keeps saying, even through all this, he keeps saying, there could never be another woman that I would ever want to be my wife. She's the only one. Like, she's just the only woman in the world for me, and if I can't be with her, I'm just gotta be with anybody. And fair enough, he does still think about Fanny as his sister, but there's no progress there. Basically, in just like one paragraph, it's like, it wasn't too long before Edmund came to realize that he could think of Fanny as a wife and like more than a sister, and she was very well suited to him. And that's all. There's no realization, there's no change of mind, there's no romantic scene between them. You don't get any of that. Everything is just resolved in the last couple pages. Like, everything that happened, there's no like realization of romance scene. It just says in passing that like Edmund was delighted to realize that like Fanny had been loving him all this time. So there's this very abrupt, very unsatisfying wrap up. It's almost like, oh, all the emotional strain is gone, everything's just fine now, so there's nothing left to write about. There's this sense that if it's not unpleasant and dramatic, it's not worth writing about. I'm just done. All these happy things are totally uninteresting and unimportant. I'll just throw them at the end. Which is not like her other writing. Pride and Prejudice has a pretty satisfying scene where the characters are finally able to like talk about, they confess their love and they talk about what they were thinking and what they were feeling all these different times, which is so natural. That's what people would talk about. I believe Eleanor and Edward have a similar scene. Later on, I haven't got there yet, that's next week, but Emma and Mr. Knightley have a very distinct scene, and then a wrap-up after that. Edmund and Fanny don't get any scene. They get nothing. I almost feel like it would have been a better ending to like have a scene between them, like where they're talking, and where Edmund kind of starts to realize that maybe his feelings for her are more, and kind of hint that's where it's going, and then wrap the book up there. This very abrupt, like, this happened, then this happened, then this happened, and these people got married and moved to this place or that place, and all of this worked out just fine. I hate that. I hate that in a book. It's lazy, and again, it seems like it's mitigating the importance of happy things and saying that only dramatic, unpleasant things are important. I know that's not how Jane Austen feels, again, from her other books, but that's what this one really feels like, and it's really frustrating, especially when you have this character who spent the entire book being miserable. And then it's like, once she's happy, you don't even get a scene of that. You don't even know what she's like when she's happy, basically. So, really frustrating. That all being said, I didn't hate reading it. It was pretty rough at first. Once you kind of get into the stride of the story, you can go along okay. I was afraid I would have trouble finishing this one within the week, but I finished it a couple days ago. And yeah, it's not like it's a drag to get through. Once you're into it, you're kind of like, okay, I want to know what's going to happen, but it's just nowhere near on the level of her other books. And just if you were reading it with the expectations from Sensibility and Pride and Prejudice, it would be a terrible disappointment. I'm really interested to know, though, if there's anybody out there who's like a big Mansfield Park fan. I've never heard of somebody who was, but there are good things in it. There are some really good dialogue passages, some really good examining of thoughts that Jane Austen is so good at. Just discussions of different things. I saw this quote the other day. Don't know who said it. It might have been Eleanor Roosevelt, but I'm not sure. But the quote was something like, great minds discuss ideas, average minds discuss events, small minds discuss people. And Jane Austen fills all categories because, let's be honest, everybody wants to talk about all those things because they're all interesting. But she very much likes to discuss ideas and to play with ideas and present ideas to her audience. She's never all about entertaining. She's all about making people think about things, but in these interesting, complex social settings that her books are famous for. So it's never in like a moral, like I'm giving you a moral or I'm preaching kind of way. It's always with these characters caught up in dealing with things. So it feels very real and very natural. And I do really appreciate that. So there's some good reading material in it. It's just very lacking in character. And honestly, the plot's not super interesting. The places aren't as interesting. Altogether, it's inferior by a lot to the first two. But still not an awful book. It has some good things about it. So, I'm through with this one, and I'm on to Emma, which is, I can't remember whether I've read Emma all the way through twice, or if I've just gone back and looked through it a second time. But I'm very familiar with Emma. It's an excellent one. I'm curious to see if after reading it, I'll be like, it's actually better than Pride and Prejudice and Sense and Sensibility. I'm not sure. But I'm really looking forward to it. I know I love that one. So I will see you next Friday with my review of Emma. Thanks for watching. Bye.